So it'll be hard not to be bullish on Hedera after what we have to cover this week. We have Neuron, which seems really primed to lead the Web3 decentralized physical infrastructure and Internet of Things space. Charles Adkins had some fascinating things to say around crypto mergers and acquisitions. There's an announcement around Karate Combat. The crypto market is really starting to heat up again, and much more. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here every week to cover everything that's going on in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for educational or entertainment purposes only. So we're going to start off with a clip from Orbis86's interview with Charles Adkins, and then we'll come back and discuss it afterwards.
The interesting things is we're having conversations, and we've actually had other L1s reach out to us and say that they've built specific products on their chain, and then later come to find out it doesn't scale well, or that it doesn't have the security features that they had hoped to have, or speed and scalability that they need, to the point where there's some chains out there asking if they can actually lodge and build their products on Hedera now, which we're finding really interesting. I think, there's probably a lot of us in this room that have been through several technology cycles. Like, I started mid-90s really with technology in the financial sector. And I would say, I could even go back to the 1920s and say we've seen this all before with automobiles. I mean, when automobiles first came out, 629 different brands, one was a race car, one was for luxury, one was for durability, like everybody was different. And what happened was you ended up getting people that started standardizing. Same thing happened with browsers, the internet. Everybody wanted their own email domain. Everybody wanted their own version of a browser. And then eventually you have HTTP. So we're starting to get into that space with blockchain L1s in particular, where a lot of us are starting to talk to each other and think about, what is the standardization? And from a technical standpoint, what happens when you actually need to combine or merge token supplies? Like, conversations about M&A and standardization in the industry are starting to happen.
So this is something that really hasn't been talked about very much in the crypto space. And usually when we talk about, a network not working out, they become a dead chain. But there's often really good projects that are trying to build on top of those networks, not to mention these fantastic communities that are built around these networks. And there's a lot of value there. So it does make sense that once we've determined which networks are viable and are going to work out fairly well, for these projects to move over to the networks. But then you have the issue of the tokens on that legacy network, and how do they move over? And, if you're talking about a smaller network or a smaller market cap network, we'll say like Casper, which had some issues a few months ago, and we'll say the projects that were building on them decide they want to try to build on top of Hedera. But what about their token supply? What about their personnel? Even though the price of that token has come down significantly, the fully diluted market cap is still $169 million. So really significant. That would be about 3 billion HBAR. So we're not going to take that out of our current supply and just give that to them to allow their token holders to come over to our network. Maybe a significant discount to that. So, if they were going to pretty much die anyway, this is an opportunity for those token holders to change out to a network that might survive, like Hedera. But it would have to be fairly favorable to the Hedera token holders. Then you have the networks that are really big out there, but we'll say don't have the technical capability to thrive as much as Hedera might. We'll say XRP wants to make a move over to Hedera or combine with Hedera. Same thing is the issue. Now, this is one of the few instances where I actually could see increasing the Hedera supply. I could see going from 50 billion tokens to 100 billion tokens, and those 50 billion tokens give the XRP personnel the opportunity to move over to the Hedera network. But I don't think they'd be too happy about that either, considering they're currently worth, fully diluted market cap, close to $60 billion, and Hedera is only worth about $3 billion. But if the token isn't going to work out there anyway, it might make sense to move over. But these are a lot of questions that are going to have to be hammered out in the future. I hope we do see these mergers and acquisitions, because like I said, there is tremendous value on these networks that might end up being dead chains both in terms of their communities, about the projects that are being built on top of them, and the teams that are around these projects as well. So I really hope this moves forward in a constructive way. So we are going to shift gears here a fair amount and move into decentralized physical infrastructure and Internet of Things with Neuron. They are really making some amazing strides. They're just a fantastic company, and the fact that they're building on Hedera makes it that much more exciting. So let's listen to what James has to say. James, welcome back. Thanks for hopping on.
Hi, Brandon. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to jumping into this because it seems like you've been really busy lately. So, James, we've seen some products built on Hedera get significant funding recently, and Neuron is included in that. Is there anything that the broader ecosystem, Hedera, and the official entities out there could learn from the success that you've seen and potentially lean into it?
Sure, yeah. So I think really when it comes to fundraising, you have to go and get a few things in place for a business. First of all, you have to have a clear product with a clear value proposition. Like my company or this project does this for these users to achieve Y, whatever that might be. And so you need to really nail that down as to what that really is, what your value proposition is. And then really it's a case of having a really clear team, some early traction, and also kind of ideally some revenue as well. If you can have revenue at that stage, then that really puts you into the camp for seed funding. Quite a lot of people, I think, struggle with positioning and narrative because ultimately Web3 is like highly driven by narrative, and you need to understand whereabouts in this wide Web3 ecosystem your project fits in. And so we went through an accelerator last year with Outlier Ventures. For us, it was fantastic. I know people might have mixed results, but certainly for us, we had huge amounts of benefit added to the project when we went through that accelerator. And that really helped us drill down all of those vital components, which put us in a position now where we're ripe for funding. We've been speaking with a lot of people, spoken to a lot of investors, and, we've got a lot of interest in the project and very excited to see the next sort of 18 months play out now.
Well, one of the things that I read in that announcement was that you do have that revenue, and I think that's critically important. What do your customers look like right now, and how's that revenue coming?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of revenue, we've been doing a lot of projects for people who want censored or want to basically do proof of concepts. So we've doing a lot of that kind of early work. A lot of projects out there, they kind of create their token and then they worry about customers afterwards. We kind of flipped it the other way. We said, well, what is it customers want? Make sure that we actually achieve that on a small scale setting. And now we go and scale the network with confidence that we're actually doing things the right way. Our first use case in aviation, clearly, aviation is a really complex use case. You've got regulations, you've got integrations going on, and you've got safety and availability of this data. It's really critical from a safety perspective. So how are you actually going to deliver that to a customer? It's all good rolling out a huge network, but ultimately, if you get to the end and you end up with a situation which many deep ends face is, oh, actually, this isn't very useful. We should have done that instead. So we want to avoid all of that. We want to make sure that people who are investing their time and energy into helping, build up sensor networks across the planet, that at the end of it, they actually have something to show for it. And that's really important for us.
Well, the last time we spoke, let's talk a little bit about that infrastructure and building out that infrastructure. The last time we spoke, you were just getting started with your beta program. How's that gone so far?
Yeah, so it's gone great. I think we've got about 70 participants at the moment in the beta program. We've kind of stopped bringing new people in because we want to focus on some other things. We need to go and get this ready for mainnet now. But ultimately, that first 70, we've got about 55 of those sensors are live now. So we've got about 80% of them have managed to get set up. The others, for some various reasons, haven't done it yet, whether it's they've been on holiday or away for a while, or they've only set up one and they need to go and travel to their brothers or sisters to go and set up the others. So there are a few still to come online, but we've got about 55 online at the moment, which is giving us coverage on about 4 or 5 continents at the moment, which is fantastic. We've got people in Australia, we've got people in Malaysia, Japan, across Europe, across North America, and even into South America now. So I think we're only missing sort of Africa, I think, and sort of some parts of Asia now. So we're really starting to build up that picture, the map of services. Obviously, we're still very, very early stage. We've still got a long way to go in terms of building up a huge sensor network. But the next step really for us in this is not us selling sensors to people. The sensors we have are from a really strong sensor company who basically have the best sensor on the market at the moment. They're already integrated. They've already got thousands of these sensors deployed. And they've basically agreed now to integrate Neuron directly into their sensors when they ship out from the manufacturing plant. So we don't have to touch the sensors anymore. And they will go on sale in the next few weeks, which basically relieves all of that stress and hassle from us having to distribute them ourselves. So that's going to be massive for us. So that allows us to start scaling the sensors massively. And they will handle all of the shipping. They'll make sure you've got all the right parts and make sure that all of the software is pre-configured. So you just need to go and register your account and connect it to Neuron when it arrives, and you're ready to go.
So these sensors, are they going out for other reasons as well and being used for other things? And then pretty much somebody can just realize, hey, I already have this sensor ready to go. I would like to also participate in Neuron and just flip it on?
Yeah, so we hope to be able to include, there's already existing jet vision sensors out there. There's thousands of these things. They're actually one of the most popular sensors out there, which existing flight tracking networks or some of the more professional flight tracking networks are already using. The key difference between this one and other sensors you'll see on the market are ultimately the other ones don't have high accuracy timing associated with them, and you basically lost all of your security by not having that. So really, this is an absolute requirement from the regulator, and this is what we found out, as I said, in that early stages of talking to customers and integrating with customers. So we've gone about choosing the right sensor. So these sensors are live on the internet, basically. That's really the vision for us, is all of these sensors are live for third parties to actually integrate into their software. We've already got a few integrations already done. We've got some more coming. And they're going to start consuming that data very soon. So we relied on a private testnet up until probably a few months ago now, but we're now flipping those integrations now over to the public testnet. So what you're seeing in the beta program is our public testnet, and we're now seeing those integrations flipping over, and then we'll start consuming that data. Then our next move is really about moving to a mainnet situation, so we don't end up with these the complications with testnet resets, where people sort of lose their accounts every sort of 6 months. So being able to move over to mainnet really allows us to, first of all, eliminate those testnet resets, and secondly, we can then start thinking and worrying about the token and how people can start getting compensated.
Yep, incentivizing. That's the whole point of Web3 in many different aspects. But of course, you're integrating Hedera in a lot of different ways, and a lot of it's about that integrity of data. But the other thing that I was really excited about that I saw was your project blueprint that you've had since the last time we spoke as well. Can you talk about that and the attention that it's gained?
Yeah, definitely. So we had this huge project. It started about 18 months ago or so. And we've spent a lot of time basically integrating with various different traffic management companies, drone manufacturers and such like, and even airports as well. And we've basically finished sort of like the first or the second stage of that now. And the second stage was really about showing that blueprint to industry. So we had people from aviation regulators, we had people from National Air Traffic Service there, we had commercial entities who would be potential customers for us, we had government officials, the whole works. It was a huge event with over 100 people, all suited and booted, and it was great to sort of have that feedback from the audience of like, this is really cool. We can see how this now becomes a reality, and with the regulators there as well. A lot of regulators, their heads down in writing regulations and doing paperwork, and for them to be able to actually see it in reality is huge for them, because they're like, okay, this makes sense. We can sort of see what the future looks like now. And now their policy is all kind of now narrowing in. How do we actually now flip the switch and go to a fully commercial market? So that work is now ongoing. We're working with a couple of partners to deliver the software assurance piece. Ultimately, software assurance is where things become highly commercial at that stage. So we're aiming to be one of the first to actually get software assurance on the data that comes out of the network. And that's really key, because ultimately what that does is it proves, first of all, your system is really robust and reliable. And secondly, shows the regulator that it's safe. Once that happens, that's the last remaining hurdle to full-scale commercialization. So we're working on that at the moment, and we hope to have that finished sort of probably mid toward or the end of next year.
So you're having these conversations with potential customers. Are there any of the teams that you're having really exciting conversations around, either within this drone and aviation use case or beyond?
Yeah, so we're like, because we've obviously built up this network of drone and aviation related partners who love what we're doing, love the product. They're also interested in other kinds of data sources as well. So we've looked at GNSS RTK as one source, and the second one is weather data. These are both really important. If a drone is navigating around, it needs to know where it is very precisely. So RTK GNSS allows them to get sort of 2 centimeter accuracy on their position. The second piece is weather. Well, obviously, you don't really want to be flying when it's a hurricane. So they need to understand these things from a safety perspective. So by integrating those into the network, that will also give us other avenues to exploit those customer channels that we've already worked or already produced. So the next real stage for us is we're already talking to one of a popular GNSS network who's in the Web3 domain. You probably have heard of them. I won't name any names until it's official, but we're currently doing a proof of concept with them to integrate their sensors into the Neuron network, which could give us around about 9,000 sensors sort of overnight, which would be huge for the network. So we're really now trying to look at other projects and how do we decentralize DeepIn? Because ultimately, a lot of DeepIn is actually very centralized. You flip off the switch on the server, and it's the project goes down. There's no project left. So really, that's not what Web3 is about. Web3 is all about peer-to-peer. The Bitcoin white paper, peer-to-peer digital cash. Like ultimately, that is what we're trying to do here, and we're trying to provide peer-to-peer services between different parties, whether that's a sensor and a software customer, or whether that's a retail customer and a large company. It could be either or. So democratizing service provision is really our key, and we do that with an edge-based infrastructure that allows that to happen.
So there was a pretty big story that came out of the UK around drone deliveries. Do you think deliveries is where the drone industry is really going to take off?
Yeah, it's a really, really high volume use case. So drone deliveries, you're looking at thousands of flights a day within a single city or single small town. So, when you're talking about provision of data services, then obviously that's a very attractive proposition because you've got high volume use case right there. We also look at the kind of players involved in that market. You've got Google Wing, you've got Amazon Prime, you've got Zipline, you've got Mana. These are probably the top four, I would say, out there. And we're talking to at least three of those four and having quite deep conversations with three of those four. And that they basically, Google Wing, they built the open access framework, which was in conjunction with NASA. It's called the InterUSS, USS, and they basically provide a very similar kind of architecture to how Neuron operate. So Neuron, actually, we kind of got our inspiration from this framework, which was what they have is they have this sort of network of databases, basically. So every unmanned traffic management company runs a node in this network, and it's called Cockroach DB for the tech people out there. But that network is basically being used as a little bit like a telephone directory. So these unmanned traffic management software providers can talk to each other. So they go and say, right, I've got a drone flight in this area. Is there anything in this area that I should be aware of? And they go to this address book, this decentralized address book, and they go and say, oh yeah, you need to speak to them. So they then connect peer-to-peer and then do the data exchange peer-to-peer. Well, that's exactly how Neuron operates. What we do is we instead of using Cockroach DB, which basically would have to be done on a use case by use case basis, which would be really inefficient. What we do is we use Hedera for doing this. So we use the layer one, we build all the services into that, the telephone directory, but we also provide another element which is really important, which is the validation. Ultimately, if you're doing peer-to-peer between a customer and a service provider, those people may not know each other, and we're operating in a trustless environment. So how do you bring that trust back into it? And that is where the validator nodes come in, which ultimately just enforce the service level agreement between the two parties. So if there's a dispute, they can go to the validator and say, hey, I want my money back. And if I've complied with the rules and I deserve a refund, then the validator network will go, yep, okay, we'll sign that multi-sig, and now you can return your money to you. And that's the key missing piece. That's really our secret sauce, our USP for Neuron. What's our token all about? Our token is going to be all about this validator network to provide the trust back to a decentralized service network.
Such an exciting space. So now we got to wrap things up here. What's next for Neuron? What do you have in your roadmap for now and the next several months?
Yeah, so we're currently working on the open sourcing of all of the software. So that would be the Neuron SDK. The SDK basically turns every device into a node that can then do peer-to-peer commerce with each other. The Explorer is how you find those nodes. So that's got both a web interface for visually seeing them and also an API interface for being able to pull that data from them. Again, that will be open source, so anyone could run. If someone wants to run an Explorer, then they're welcome to, and we'd be really happy to help support them. And the third piece is the smart contract. The smart contract is how you register your service. So once it's registered in the smart contract, then that's discoverable by the Explorer, and then the Explorer helps the SDK then provide all of that peer-to-peer commerce piece. So that's what's going to be open sourced. It will be documented, so other people will be able to get involved. We're currently talking about a hackathon, so we'd like to include some other developers in the ecosystem to see what they could use this for. And we've got all sorts of ideas. We're currently talking about different strands for that hackathon, which would be really exciting. And then we've got mainnet. So mainnet launch is really key for us because it allows us to sort of provide a more sustainable long-term project. The moment on testnet obviously resets every 6 months, so we don't want to just lose all of the users every 6 months. That wouldn't be a very sustainable way of doing it. So by being on mainnet, it allows us to start building and keep that growth going, but also allows us to sort of start integrating the monetary and the commercial elements of incentives, how people are going to get paid, how people are going to earn tokens and things like this, which are really important for incentivizing growth.
Well, that's what it's all about. James, thanks so much for hopping on today, telling us all about the success that you've had to this point, and good luck going forward.
Thanks so much, Brandon, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
So like James said, one of the most exciting things around decentralized physical infrastructure and Internet of Things is the potential scale here. We heard Carlos from CLSQ talking about how it's fantastic to onboard the next billion users, but let's also focus on onboarding the next trillion objects. And when you have teams like Neuron that are focusing on this, that don't seem like they can be denied, I think we have a lot of blue sky in front of us. So the next thing we're going to get into is another really talented person that's working in our crypto space, and that's Sabrina. She is hitting on all cylinders in the fintech and payments space. And the latest announcement to come out from her team is around the Universal Digital Payments Network. So IT engineering and solutions provider GFT and decentralized cloud infrastructure Red Date Technology announced the integration of Hedera and the Emtech CBDC sandbox into the Universal Digital Payments Network. The goal of the integration was to connect the UDPN and provide a single transaction gateway for transfers, transactions, and query results to support stablecoins launched on the Hedera Stablecoin Studio and also the CBDCs from Emtech's CBDC sandbox. Sabrina said as payments increasingly migrate on-chain through the adoption of stablecoins and CBDCs, the need for Hedera native assets to support emerging cross-chain payments rails has become clear. We chose to work with UDPN, a trailblazer in the field, and see this proof of concept as a first step towards connecting Hedera with the greater digital currency ecosystem. Stefan, the UDPN lead at GFT, said, "This proof of concept highlights the modularity of the UDPN architecture, which allows us to integrate with virtually any digital currency system via a transaction node. This simplifies the adoption of digital currencies in a wide range of applications and reduces integration costs for financial institutions. We're thankful for the support of the HBAR Foundation during this proof of concept and look forward to continuing our collaboration." So it's great to see these continued collaborations, and as Rob's going to say in a little while, he's planning on trying to cover some of this next week. So unfortunately, we do have to cover some scams that are going on in the Hedera ecosystem, and they're continuations of phishing scams that we've seen. So in the past, we've seen dusting attacks, where the scammers will send a very small amount of HBAR to your account and trigger your staking rewards. Well, the nice thing about these latest attacks is they're increasing the amount of HBAR they're sending. But the concern is because they are changing things up, so more people might get taken advantage of. And what they do is they send these relatively small amounts of HBAR, potentially triggering those staking rewards. And in the memo is a link, and these links are nefarious. Just clicking on them can be dangerous, but the real danger is if you then go on and enter your secret phrase. But the main point is not to click on them at all. And you'll see a couple examples here, hederarewards.s and saucerswap.site. So I guess the best thing here is just knowing what these scammers are trying to do and avoiding it completely. So we're going to get back to the good stuff. We're going to go right into Shark Bites now. Rob had some great insights and we had some great questions as well. Rob, welcome back. This week we don't have quite as many announcements. It'd be hard to live up to what we saw last week, but we have some really good questions for you.
Hey, Brandon. Yes. It's been not so big a week, but it's there's still been some pretty big things to talk about. So let's get into it.
Sure, we'll dig right into it. The first one we have comes from Rooster13, who asks, will the AUDD stablecoin be used by banks in Australia, or will each bank likely have their own stablecoin?
It's a great question. It comes down to the regulation as it materializes over the next 12 months or so. We're expecting the Australian Treasury to bring forward a new bill next year, probably in our autumn session, so in the kind of March to June period, after which we'll have a lot of clarity about what stablecoin issuers should be licensed, or how they should be licensed, and under which regime that they'll operate. At the moment, there's a kind of emerging feeling that it's probably not a full banking license, so it doesn't necessarily. That would mean that you don't have to be a full bank with an authorized deposit-taking institution license, but probably under some kind of non-cash payment facility, or what we call a stored value facility, like a gift card. Those are likely to be fit for purpose licensing regimes under which stablecoin issuers can operate. What that means is that once we have that clarity, then I would expect there to be quite a lot more competition in the market. The use cases for stablecoins are wide and varied. So I think there's room for quite a spectrum of stablecoin issuers in the Australian market and beyond. So banks, for example, might want to issue stablecoins to allow their institutional clients, big corporate customers, to efficiently transfer big ticket or high value transactions. Whereas the likes of AUDD or other stablecoin issuers at the kind of the more retail end might want to provide it for other purposes, for payments or even micropayments. So all of that said, I expect we have 5 AUDD stablecoin issuers that kind of operate. 2 aren't issuing at the moment, but there are a range of fiat-backed stablecoin issuers in Australia that I think will grow over the course of the next year and beyond once this regulation becomes clearer. But we love the AUDD team. I was talking to the CEO just a couple of days ago. They're well underway with their the development of the Hedera integration, and very excited to work more closely with them to see what we can do with that stablecoin once it's ready to go.
Well, Rob, we know you're going to keep us in the loop when it comes to stablecoins down under, and I'm looking forward to the use cases that you're going to bring to market. So the next one we have comes from Hashgraph Hustler, who says, question for Shark Bites. Hey, Brandon, do you know why Charles Adkins didn't keep his promise to do weekly or bi-weekly updates on socials about Hedera to connect more with the community? And can you have him on your show? So I think the answer to this is linked. One of the reasons why I haven't pushed Charles very much is because I've heard that he has an awful lot going on behind the scenes. I'm sure when he made that post, he had all intentions to do it, but I think he's been a lot busier than he had expected. But I do think, all of that being said, that it is important for leaders in the Hedera ecosystem to have a regular cadence where they're giving us updates on what's going on. Rob, you're one of the best at that. Do you have any insights?
Well, thank you for saying that. I only do what I think is adds value. So this is a great way to connect. For as long as people kind of value it, then I'm happy to continue doing it. I don't think Charles has broken any promises, to be honest. He didn't say when he was going to start the regular blog. So, until he says he's not going to do it, it's not a broken promise at all. It is true to say that he has a lot on his plate. He does so much behind the scenes in terms of corralling, and got governing council relationships, you've got ecosystem partner relationships, you've got his whole team that are very, very active, the Open Source Foundation announcements, all of the memberships of the external organizations. That's a lot for one guy and a relatively small team to be across. So I think that this will settle down. It will settle down in a more efficient way rather than settling down because it dies away. So, I'm sure he'll start engaging a bit more regularly. Clearly, as we all know, the community is super thirsty all the time for all the intel. So I don't think any of us can do too much. From a leadership perspective, yeah, absolutely. I think the recent events have shown that if leaders don't engage, they are not in a moral position to actually to lead properly. And so, that engagement, as you know, you've run ships, and I've, commanded men in battlefields. The leadership is about, putting yourself on the line and actually knowing your team and knowing the environment that you're working within, and and providing the information that wider group need to operate, because otherwise you lose them. And so, yeah, and I know Charles knows that as well. So I talk to him quite a lot, and the ideas he has, the moves he's making, the team he has built around him are all top class. So just give him a bit more time, and I'm sure we'll see some amazing things.
We'll give him a break. That's no problem. So Hashgraph Hustler has another one asking, what are the requirements for a company to become a governing council member regarding the need for a use case? Is an idea enough? Must it be a use case on paper, a use case that's already built, even tested on testnet, or something in between?
It's a great question, and there is no one answer. We all like to see, the pre-potted, ready-made use cases ready to go, but there are a few new council members that come with this kind of ready-made use case. So there's a kind of spectrum. There's always at least one use case, usually more than one, but sometimes it is just an idea and they're joining the council to help them move forward. Or they could be joining with a ready-made partnership, like with Mondelez. Mondelez came with SKUX. SKUX were already in market. They brought a fantastic use case. And what Mondelez saw the benefit of joining the governing council to leverage that existing position. And given the pipeline that we've got, I think there are more well thought through use cases that are more than just an idea. So, they come with a business case. They've already maybe done some prototyping, or they've already kind of picked a partner in order to have a joint go-to-market. There's a lot of the membership committee do a lot of interviewing in the background, a lot of refinement. The teams, both at there are dedicated people at Hashgraph and at the foundation, as well as in Hedera and with the MEMCOM, but do that assessment, have those conversations, and refine the proposal. We had a MEMCOM this week where we were discussing a very exciting one. All of this happens in the background. So by the time it comes to the governing council, there's a kind of package of assessment, and the use case is always one. It's kind of top of mind. We can't have any passengers anymore, and so engagement and understanding of how the Hedera services will improve both or either their existing business or new businesses that they're seeking to get into, which is often the case as well.
Rob, a quick follow-up. How long do you think these use cases take to actually roll out? Like on average, what are you seeing from, the ones that have already rolled out? You have Atma.io, of course, and then you kind of know where they are in development at this point and how far off they are from actually coming to market. How long do you think that process for these large enterprises is?
Well, I know very well because, I've been in this space for a long time. And talking as the AP Plus representative that has run many of these proofs of concept, but still has nothing in production, and touch wood, that won't be the case for very much longer. But enterprise change does take a long time, and like I said, if you're partnering, the model seems to be there's a lot of partnering going on because it creates an agility and a reduction in your go-to-market strategy. So, the ability to get into market with a partner is far easier than actually moving these, Leviathan businesses into the Web3 arena. And, and all the hoops that you have to jump through, and the change management that you have to do, and the organizational change that is often required in order to build the business around this entirely new set of capabilities. So there is no one answer. I mean, I've not seen true enterprise change delivered in less than a year. It's often much longer. Then, of course, the longer it takes, I mean, it's a truism, really. Enterprise change, old school waterfall methods that take 2 or 3 years of big scale change often never hit the target because the world's gone over here and you're kind of on this track over here. So, it rarely works. So you need agile teams, you need innovative, iterative kind of startup mindset. And that's what we're trying to instill, this kind of startup mentality, agility, focus on an MVP in market. And all of these things are or have been alien concepts to big enterprise. You see them developing out of the innovation teams with more progressive enterprise. And I think all of our governing council members are very progressive. So, they have innovation teams. They want to progress very much more quickly than they have been. But there's a lot to think of with enterprise change. So being able to carve out a small piece of the business and really direct all of that innovation and almost augmentation of existing business as opposed to completely greenfield. You've got to choose which one is the most likely to get into production, and then convince everyone while they're still in post, because enterprise people change a lot as well. So, maintaining that advocacy is one of the battles that you have to fight all the time. So, there's a lot of things to cover off when you're trying to get entirely new change into the market. That said, over the last 15 years now that we've had blockchains, it's becoming more and more apparent that these technologies are being embedded into everyday operations. And the toes in the water are actually now, we're kind of up to our knees in the water, and therefore we can, be a lot more confident. And one of the benefits of the governing council itself is that, you got this shared experience and the ability to look to other similar or comparable enterprises that are doing something which is of interest, or you can learn the lessons from. And I think that's one of the superpowers. In fact, I know it's one of the superpowers of the governing council.
Well, this is always a hot topic, enterprise use cases in general, and I know that our audience is always going to be continuing to ask those questions to get as much alpha as they possibly
keep them coming.
can.
Yeah, keep them coming, and they will come, right? They definitely will come, and some of the big use cases fall by the wayside because of all sorts of different reasons, and then new ones emerge. Use cases pop out of nowhere and surprise everyone. So there's lots to be. There's always lots to celebrate.
Yep. Well said. Well said. All right. So the next one comes from Lewis, who says, ask Rob how regulation is currently affecting the payment sector's solution focus and product rollout. Discuss as it relates to AP+. He mentions the fact that Senator Bragg's crypto regulation bill did not pass in early September 2024, citing the need for the government to continue to research the issue.
Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier, especially just with the Australian focus. Senator Bragg's bill didn't get through mainly for partisan reasons rather than because of the content of the bill, which is always one of the problems, as you well know, of right-thinking people actually don't necessarily get the well thought through legislation because of politics. So there is inhibition and constraints and a lack of progress in some areas in the payment space because of that. But I see innovation happening all over the world in payments, with stable coins, with deposit tokens. You talked to FSCO the other week about the MasterCard token or the multi-token network from MasterCard, MTN, and what they're doing with that on Hedera. We've got AUDD and we've got USDC and we've got the StraightX stablecoin in Singapore and one in Switzerland, HCHF. So, there's growing capability worldwide to use digital versions of currency. And if one transfers a digital currency, then that's a payment. It's an account transfer. It's a payment. It's a value transfer. And these new digital forms of money are being tested across the board. We talk a lot about this just being capability, and we need applications that use these digital currencies to transfer, for commerce purposes or for incentives purposes or for any other reason. That's the rising tide that's now happening. And I think like any tide of water, it flows into regulations where we see a lot more progressive thinking and a lot more kind of regulatory friendliness. So, which is why Dubai is looking like a great place to build crypto businesses. You spoke to Tim Popplewell last week from Toko Scintilla. They've got their digital assets license, their VARA license in Dubai, and I'm told there's a long queue for those licenses in Dubai. We've got a far greater clarity in Singapore, so all of the stuff coming out of Asia Pacific is kind of based out of both Singapore and Hong Kong, but mainly Singapore. MICA in Europe, regulatory clarity again, a lot of really good innovation coming out of there. Not on Hedera, but Visa had an announcement today about stablecoins being issued across their network. We've got the announcement about UDPN that came out just this morning, which I'll get into probably next week. So, there's a lot of integration of digital currency, stablecoins, token deposits with traditional networks. And the traditional networks have the reach. They have the consumer hooks, the point of sale devices, the point of sale software. It's all integrated. Flutterwave or let's say Zenny, higher volume type use cases that at some point will be able to take payments in digital currency. All of these things are, just normal online commerce, and they'll all need forms of digital currency payment. And so, I'm very, very bullish about where we are with this, across the whole of the Web3 space. And I'm certain that Hedera's, quality and speed and scale and security will shine through as a mechanism for making these payments.
Well, when you have a technology that's as revolutionary and useful as DLT, particularly, ultra efficient ones like Hedera, it really seems inevitable. It's going to happen. You're going to see that regulatory arbitrage that you've talked about in the past for the jurisdictions that don't have good regulation. They're going to start to fall behind, and eventually they're going to want to catch up. There's going to be changes in those governments until the point where we do see that rational regulation come into play, and then we're just going to be off to the races. So I'm really not worried about it. It really feels inevitable to me at this point.
It really is, and I didn't mention Drop. Of course, with with FedNow relationship, BitGo now coming out with its own stablecoin USDS, which I understand is operating under the New York license, the NYFDC, which needs sign off on every single blockchain. So that sounds like a bit of a process to me. You don't need to be entirely plugged in to the Web3 space to actually understand what's happening. I was at a summit on Monday, the Australian Financial Review, we talked about it in the past, but the main kind of financial paper here in Australia runs an annual summit for digital assets and crypto. And even though there was a lot of talk about CBDCs and real world asset tokenization and regulation and all the normal stuff, pretty much every single panel discussed or mentioned stablecoins as the main driver of this next wave and of utility and capability within the whole of the Web3 space. So it really is inevitable.
Couldn't agree more. All right, so the next one comes from IPEX, who says, as per the current poll, the Hedera community does not believe staking HBAR tokens secures the network in any meaningful way. Outside of the governing council securing the network, of course. Does retail secure the network in any meaningful capacity? So I think I can actually take this one, Rob. Right now, 70% of those people that took the poll are actually correct because we are permissioned. The trust comes from those that are actually running the nodes. the council members themselves. But as we move to the point where we have community nodes and eventually completely permissionless nodes, that's when we're going to need all the HBAR holders to stake to then secure the network. But in the meantime, we do have to condition people to get used to staking and making sure we have all of that infrastructure in place and everything ready on the network to allow staking to get to the point where we can actually do it when it is important. But Rob, do you have anything you want to add on that one?
No, that's absolutely right. This phase of decentralization, has native staking rewards, but they're de minimis, and it has the governing council effectively staking all of the current nodes, and the treasury and everything else. So, and that's fine. I mean, the mechanisms are there. As we start loosening the controls around the decentralization into community nodes and beyond, then the retail owners and the proxy staking into those nodes will kick in as by design.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. All right, so the next one comes from Deepak You Wannabe, who asks, Sir Rob of the Sharks, do you think Hedera has the differentiators that enterprises actually want? With BlackRock building on Ethereum and Sony launching their L2, I can't help but to think that maybe enterprises don't need the things that Hedera offers. Rob, I know you're going to set them straight on this one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult question to answer because every enterprise is different. Enterprises tend to build on things where they have developer resources, and sometimes the developer experience kind of leads to technical decisions. That's never ends well, or very rarely ends well. But technical selections are often informed by experience, internal experience. And some of these announcements also are still experimental, still discovery based, and it's fine to be discovering stuff in other technologies. However, I think that our enterprise grade kind of headline is as valid as it's ever been. Right? We were built to be enterprise grade. We have some of the world's most significant enterprises on the governing council. We've just open sourced the full stack through the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust project, and as the first layer one, which attracts the many millions of Web 2 developers into our developer community. We have APIs which are very familiar for enterprise delivery. We have the low and predictable costing structure, the fiat-based transactional fee structure. Everything is familiar to enterprise. So, the fact that some use cases could be built on an Ethereum layer 2 is fine, right? Because I think it's probably experimental, or it's probably, there are use cases, enterprise use cases that either don't know or don't care about the compromises being taken at layer 2. It's fair to say that the Hedera reach, is not maybe as great as it could be because we need to market more heavily. But events like Davos last year, I was talking to Charles, and he said he came back with a long list of new targets for follow-up calls from the enterprise world. As we continue to demonstrate delivery through the governing council or through partner organizations, I think that will just grow. So, all of the reasons that we've been preaching for years are still true. And then there's sustainability. So every single enterprise on the planet now has to account for its impact, account for its ESG policy is being implemented in a way that, shareholders and stakeholders and customers need to be comfortable with. And all the investment we've made and the great, progress we've made on our Guardian ecosystem resonates with every single enterprise on the planet, and no other layer one can talk about that. I mean, that is actually one of the, I won't say killer apps. It's far more than a killer app. It's a killer capability of the Hedera network that I know Wes and his team are really driving hard into the corporate user base. So the demand side for offsets and credits and emissions tracking tokens and everything else. So, though that's a great example, I think, of a consistent and common reason to use Hedera. And we only need one, because once we get one hook in, then then those same developers become more familiar with building on Hedera, which is super straightforward for a Web 2 developer, and then everything follows. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's no question that Hedera isn't still the most appropriate layer one network for enterprise.
And we know that Wes is building us one heck of a moat in that ESG space in our Guardian ecosystem.
For sure,
so I'd love to see what we're seeing there. So the last one comes from T-Mob 1963, who says, question for Shark Bites. This may not pertain directly to Hedera, but hopefully it does. When do you envision a future where every iOS and or Android device comes with an integrated wallet by default? I have a number in my mind, Rob, but what's yours?
Well, when? I think I don't know. It's not my area. I mean, Solana have just issued a Solana phone, right? 140,000 pre-orders apparently. So I mean, it's clearly a thing. I don't imagine it's going to be very long. Maybe this next kind of bull cycle phase will be the one that Apple or Google or whoever seek to embed crypto chips. I mean, the technology's there. There are some specialist phones. I think 3 or 4. I think Galaxy has one as well. Specialist phones that in their secure enclave or in the chip itself, there's kind of the capability of having a crypto wallet, which is just a key manager, and we call them wallets, but it's a PKI crypto key management chip. So yeah, why not? I think it would be really cool to have that embedded in all our devices, as long as it could be upgraded, and when quantum comes along, it doesn't kind of hack all of our phones. So I think there's some downside. I mean, I like the idea of using old phones as cold storage wallets as well. So you can, as long as you're not connected to the internet and you've got a great wallet app, then phones can already be that thing. But I know the questioner was more talking about it being embedded in the hardware. Do you really want it? Do we want our phones to have to be the key signers as well? I'm not sure that's a good thing. But
well, time
what
will
do you
tell.
think? What's your?
I thought that the furthest out would be 5 years, that there would be some kind of native wallet on your phone as soon as you got it. Of course, you'd still want to create your own private key and all that kind of stuff when you got it. But I don't think it's that far off. But then we also have Fliggs, which I'm going to be talking about them again here in a little bit, where they're looking already at having native mobile services around the crypto space. So it's great to see all around. Rob, that's all that I have for you today. But next week, I want to ask you a little bit about something I already talked about in the show. And that was Charles talking about how there are other layer ones that are approaching Hedera, finding out that their products really can't work on whatever the infrastructure that they've built, and talking about moving those products over to Hedera. So what we're talking about there is like mergers and acquisitions in the crypto space, which kind of blows my mind a little bit. It's the only place where I would see where it would make sense to expand supply on the Hedera network, but we'll leave that one for next week. Either way, thank you so much again for coming on here and answering the community's questions.
Thanks for the heads up. I'll do some homework on that one. I'll see you next week.
Now, the next interview we're going to get into is around tooling for HBAR investors. I love to frame HBAR buyers and HBAR holders as investors. Having these tools for investors to use to evaluate the entire Hedera ecosystem is fantastic. But to get to the point here, I interviewed Brian. He is one of the co-founders of Hashpoint, who is providing the tooling to evaluate Hedera currently and into the future. So let's listen to what he has to say. Brian, welcome. Thank you for hopping on.
I appreciate it. It's good to be here. Thanks, Brandon.
Well, it is my pleasure. Brian, before we really dig into it, could you just tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to build on Hedera?
Yes, certainly. I came to Hedera as a investor. My background is in traditional finance, and I was a tech investor and went down the rabbit hole on Hedera just like everybody else. And as an investor, Hashpoint came out of my desire to model, analyze, and value HBAR. It's kind of a twofold process. One is, analyzing the technology, analyzing the opportunity and getting sold on that. And then the second piece of that is it a good investment? And the amount of data, the amount of information, or separately, the amount of data that's available in blockchain and on ledgers and in mirror nodes is abundant, but the amount of information is actually quite limited. That data is not really in a usable form, and it's unrefined format. And so Hashpoint became a investor-focused, investor-centric, not exactly an explorer, but same type of model, but really trying to get at the underlying Hedera trends and driving towards a cogent valuation model and valuation framework that made sense. And it's challenging because a proof of stake token is a really unique asset. I can't find anywhere where you've got one asset with two different purposes. It's the currency for the network user, and it's an investment asset to stake. And so it's got two different demand curves, two different buyers with different incentives. And so to understand how to value that, it actually takes a little bit of sitting around with numbers and thinking about it and playing with valuation models. And I think what I've developed and what it's novel, but I think it captures the entire dynamic of HBAR and the role it plays in the Hedera ecosystem. And I'm looking forward to showing it to you.
Well, you're hitting on a lot of different points that I really agree with. Number one, that I think all of these networks, as time goes on, they're going to be evaluated more just looking straight at the data, kind of like a stock would be. Of course, it's very different from a stock, but looking at those fundamentals, how much revenue is being brought in and so forth, to really dial in and figure out what these are worth. And the other thing is your path. Your path is similar to so many people. And I think when we talk about the HBAR community member or the Hedera community member, it's almost always completely synonymous with the HBAR holders. They are some of your first builders. They're some of your first users of all the products that we have in our space. And it's probably our strongest marketing arm that we have in the space. So they really are critical to the growth of the ecosystem. But you've already kind of told us a little bit about Hashpoint, so we can make some guesses around that. But why don't you walk us through it and show us some of the features?
Yeah, let me pull it up. The platform is built, as I said, it's a investor-centric platform. It's built for an investor. Most of the other network explorers have, if you want to know the time to consensus on node 31 of the last growth trade, you can find it. But for the perspective of an investor, the data is very curated. The way it's modeled and presented is to be informative to an investor. So most of the data on the dashboard is data that people will recognize in terms of TPS and transaction counts and that sort of thing. The one area that I think is going to be pretty important as time goes by is the revenue by service data, and looking at the transactions. Obviously right now Atma is most of the transactions, but the interesting thing is the contribution. 99% of the transactions are Atma. 94% is revenue, and if you even kind of toggle that out a little bit further, you start to see something that looks a little even different with almost 100% of the transactions from Atma, but only 83% of revenue. And that really just speaks to the multiple of revenue that is in the other services on the network. And if there's even, and I can show you, if there's even a slightest mix shift in revenue from the consensus service to these other services, the amplification on revenue is pretty steep.
And you have some pretty nice charting features as well, right?
Yeah, I've got to give credit to my brother, who is the developer. I'm the finance guy. He's the developer. So it's definitely a collaborative effort. But yeah, we'll go through some of these charts real quickly. Some of the network data and revenue statistics are things you'd expect to see and you'd want to see. We call out Atma here because right now it's the primary use case. But over time, as the composition of Hedera's business changes and the network changes, then this site will change too. Right now we don't have a use case breakout because, again, ATMA is the primary use case. But we, there's an ability here to look at all of these metrics by service. Again, consensus is most of the business, so this may not be the most, relevant to an investment decision at this point. But over time, I think this kind of segmentation is going to become increasingly important. The revenue charts, again, just so we can show trend revenue, and if somebody wants to get down into the details on this, you can get down into the monthly, and we could even take it down to the weekly and daily, but with an effort to not get lost in the weeds and kind of focus on what's important to an investor, we put some parameters on that. Again, here's that same look at revenue, transactions, and revenue by service. Again, you can look at this any way you want, by year, by quarter, by month, aggregate it any way you want. But again, it's really a trend analysis tool to look at the transactions by service and then see how that corresponds to the revenue by service.
Brian, another thing that I noticed that I thought was really interesting was the flow into account 800. I thought that was an interesting chart.
Yeah, the staking economics is probably, I think at this point, one of the most insightful charts. Certainly when I built it and I was looking at these graphs for the first time, looking at these visuals, I was really surprised by a couple of points. First off, the top panel, when you look at the flow of HBAR into staked rewarded status, it was about 7.1 billion when that transition from a 6.5% APY to a max 2.5% was made. And yet the amount of HBAR staked continued to grow. So that was not, I think most people thought that this was a trigger to maybe see a decline. But in fact, we saw the HBAR stake continue to increase. The other thing that's interesting is then when you get out to April, you do start to see this decline, and we've lost about 10%. And it's hard to correlate one for one what would have happened in April, but we do know that there was some turmoil in, the Hedera community in April. And, it would not be surprised to see that this kind of trend correlates to, maybe diminished trust, in some of the powers or the organizations within the ecosystem. But it'll be interesting to see if this begins to turn up as the TPS has recovered pretty nicely lately. These charts are the ones that I think really stand out, though. You see the turquoise is HBAR flow into account 800. The yellow is the staking rewards paid out of account 800. And you can see the effect of the change in the staking rewards program on those flows. And in the net, you can see what has happened. And what I think is probably taken, most people don't know. If you query most HBAR holders, they can probably quote two numbers to you, the current TPS and the current staking APY. And, again, it's lots of data out there, but there's not a lot of information. And I think this kind of information here and this kind of data gets lost. And that is that account 800 is now positive. There's a net inflow now into account 800, which means our staking yield, while low, is actually real yield. It's not inflationary. It's not paid out of pre-minted tokens, but it's paid out of transaction fees. So, I think that's a milestone that is lost on some people. You can still argue that this staking reward is too low, and the policy should be to pay a higher nominal reward to attract capital, or there's good arguments to be made that Hedera could be paying a higher staking reward than just this. But nonetheless, I think this is a milestone, and I think people should be aware of it. And then the last thing here is we've kind of built a staking APY projections chart so that you can see how the staking APY will trend at given TPS rates, the current. And then we've modeled 10,000 and 25,000, but the next iteration, this will be an interactive chart so people can take a look at their own assumptions and play with this model. on their own.
Brian, I love what I'm seeing here. You know, I love to dig into the numbers. I do feel like they could probably distribute some more tokens using staking. I think it's a good tool to get some of the HBAR out there and to attract capital, as you mentioned. But this is going to allow us to really analyze and dig into the numbers as in the future. I think it's going to become that much more critical, as we talked about before. Now, I was going to ask you, who your target audience, who your target user was, but I think you've explained that pretty clearly. It's the HBAR holder, it's the investor out there, and I think that's where we should be focusing moving on into the future. But is there anything else you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
The valuation model on this is something that I think it's unique and it's novel to Hedera, just given that Hedera has got a unique pricing structure within layer one DLTs. And this is a model that simply is premised on the idea that the value that comes in the network is the value that goes out of the network. You can't pay out more in staking rewards and node rewards than you earn in transaction fees over long periods of time. And this is a model that simply creates an equilibrium curve between the price of HBAR and the price and the staking reward that puts this network in equilibrium. And you can put your own scenarios in here and see how that equilibrium curve changes. And if you're a long-term HBAR holder, what you really want to know is, why am I holding it? I mean, what's the potential return here? And this tool, I think, lets people really visualize if the 100-year network delivers and the TPS scenarios, get to the level people think they could, then, the reward should be quite handsome and people can model that out for themselves here.
Well, Brian, I really appreciate you building out this tooling, and thanks for coming on today and telling us about it.
I really appreciate the time, Brandon. Thank you.
Now, all due respect to Brian, but I actually disagree a little bit looking at the trend of participation in staking rewards on Hedera. To me, it looks like there was a marked change in trajectory when they announced the change in staking rewards several weeks before they dropped off, and the increase completely flatlined not long after as people realized the staking rewards would continue to drop. However, I do agree that the turmoil in the Hedera ecosystem, coupled with the rewards dropping to under 0.2%, caused Hedera staking participation to actually start to drop off. I think this kind of data will better inform the council on the rewards that are necessary to get good participation. But either way, I love what Hashpoint is providing, and I'm probably one of their first customers. I got an annual subscription. Obviously, it's going to come in really handy on the show, but I think it's also going to be useful as we get more investors in, as the Hedera ecosystem continues to grow and that revenue continues to increase. So the next thing we're going to jump into is Karate Combat. There were several really exciting tweets that I saw come from Only LARPing, who we've interviewed on here a few times in the past. He explains why they issued the Karate token, saying they have over 6 million followers and hundreds of millions of views per month. But the converting all of this awareness into super fandom, which is where sports leagues really start to see success, is really hard. And the way they can make this a lot easier is through financialization through a token like Karate. He says half the fans that watch Karate Combat don't even watch the sports unless they bet. So that's where Up Only Gaming comes in. And I know it works because I have absolutely become a super fan. And I know without Up Only Gaming, it probably wouldn't have happened, even though I think Karate Combat has a fantastic product. In another post, he continues to outline why Karate Combat is having success, and it's distributed pretty much across every social media platform. He highlights that their rule set is focused on creating entertaining fights, that they produce each event to look like a unique level in a video game, and of course, that financialization and governance through the token. And he also had a post highlighting what he says is the biggest announcement in Karate Combat history at Karate Combat 50 in early October. Now, I will say, not financial advice, but I am adding to my karate position. I'm hoping to add a little bit more. I bought most of this before he talked about this announcement, but I saw this latest dip several months ago as a great opportunity to get into some HTS tokens, and the karate token was top on my list. All right, so we're going to move from sports into telecom with Fliggs. And the only thing we want to highlight here is we know that Fliggs is leveraging Hedera to bring a Web3 first mobile experience to its customers. And Fliggs is up for a Mobile Virtual Network Operator Award, and you can follow the link on their post to give them an upvote. And with that, let's jump into some network analysis. Most of the week, the network throughput was at about 2,400 transactions per second, but at the time of recording, we're at about 1,800 TPS. We processed over 1 billion total transactions with a max TPS of about 6,800. Account creation slowed a bit. We created about 16,000 accounts, and time to consensus finality is still down at 2.9 seconds. Moving down to our fungible tokens, Wrapped HBAR took the top spot, followed by Karate, Dovu, Native USDC, and Sauce. Siki is up next, then Energy Trade Token, Hashpax Pack Token, Earthling Steam, and Bridged USDC. Looking at our NFTs, the Malaysian student credential is holding strong in that top spot, followed by Saucer Swap's LP token, the Road Code 2024 access card, Doctor Who Worlds Apart, and the Not a Slime World NFT. Next up, we have the H-Suite LP token, Creamies, Cyber Hedera Pixelborgs, Hedera Monkeys, and finally the Silk Swap LP token. And with that, let's hop into some DeFi. The Hedera total value lock jumped to almost $58 million. Over $53 million of that is on Saucer Swap, $2.9 million on H-Suite, and $1.5 million on HeliSwap. Looking at the HBAR and crypto markets, we've been on a bit of a tear with Bitcoin up 1% on the day and 5% on the week to 65,700. HBAR is down slightly on the day, but up an impressive 19% on the week to 6.1 cents. We're bumping up against an area of resistance, and 5.1 to 5.2 cents should be a good area of support. But of course, HBAR will look to the broader crypto market for direction. HTS tokens have also been ripping, and if that continues, we'll take a look at it next week. So next week, I'm going to try to get Sabrina on to talk about fintech and payments, where she's been having so much success. I'm also going to try to get Dead Pixels on. Of course, we're going to have Shark Bites on, so drop your questions down below if you have anything on the HBAR economy or the Hedera ecosystem. That's all we have. We'll see you next week.